Look, yeah, okay, this is an Aussie icon, we get it, but like what goes wrong with them? And now that they're like a decade old, how are they aging? What do they like to drive? And should you buy one? Let's find out. Okay, now if you're in the other 99.67% of the world's population that are not Australian, you're probably wondering what the hell this is. Let's explain. First of all, the Ford Falcon is, or I should say, was a large rear-wheel drive practical family car that's available as a ute, a wagon, or a sedan. Being designed, engineered and built here in Australia, these things are as Aussie as Vegemite, or as Aussie as something wearing an American badge can be. And for many years, decades even, this thing was the arch nemesis to Holden's Commodore. Now this is an FG Series 2, which basically means it's the middle child of the FG family, which was the last generation of Ford Falcons, of which there were 7. Now of this FG family, you can get them in a whole bunch of different flavors as long as it's a ute or a sedan. We're talking examples from efficiency-conscious turbocharged 4-cylinder and LPG-powered 6-cylinder models, popular with taxi drivers and fleet sales, through to more luxury-focused 6-cylinder executive saloons like the G6E, through to the performance car XR versions like the V8-powered XR6 Sprint, not to mention the more hardcore models from Ford's local tuning arm FPV or Ford Performance Vehicles, which really deserve their own videos. And look, we'll get to all of those down the track, but in this video, we're just going to be focusing on what many consider to be the sweet spot of the FG range, and that is the XR6 Turbo and all of its variants. Now, there are naturally aspirated XR6s out there, but in this video, we're just going to be focusing on the cars that feature this work of art, the Barra Turbo. Now, as far as trim specs that are packing this masterpiece, there are technically 6, although this car is technically a 7th. See, this specific car is an ex-highway patrol car. So basically, it's like the bog stock model, but it is featuring the FPV wheels, Brembo brakes, and a few holes and bits and pieces where like accessories were mounted. Actually, speaking of modifications, you probably know this, but these things are massive in the tuning scene. There are examples of these pumping out basically all of the horsepowers in the world. Okay, now pricing for these at the moment is really interesting. At one end of the spectrum, you can get super high kilometer, bad condition early models for as little as like 15,000 bucks. At the other end of the spectrum, look at like an FGX XR6 Sprint in mint condition, hardly any Ks. They're asking over 100,000 bucks. But just be careful, because if you're buying one because they are becoming collectible, the ones that are going to go either up in value or maybe even hold their price generally have to be super low kilometers and in mint condition. If it's modified or abused, forget it. But guys, no matter what your budget is, do not get trapped into paying way too much for these, either when it comes to buying them or even financing them. Simply hit the driver link down there to find the very best finance packages easily online. There are no hidden fees and you can get pre-approval in just minutes. Plus, if you do all of that via that link down there, you're gonna get a free $150 fuel voucher. How good is that? Okay, now ready for a very controversial opinion here? I don't think performance Fords look anywhere near as convincing as performance Holdens. I'll show you what I mean. See, with performance Holdens, it feels like they designed the performance version first and then unwrapped it to make like the standard car, like the taxis. But with Fords, it's almost like they designed the taxi or the standard car first and then went, oh, hang on, we've got to make like performance versions of these, haven't we? Let's just stick a wing on the back, some bigger wheels, maybe some bigger air vents, and yeah, that'll do. But then I suppose the flip side of this is the G6E Turbo. See, that thing, that's like the quintessential sleeper. No one's expecting a car that looks like a classy hire car or a classy taxi to have the performance that it does. Very cool. Also, is it just me, or do you think like the updated FGX looks a bit squinty, like it's trying to read a sign from far away? Like, what does that say? These two, the two FG, the early ones, they're the lookers. Also, these are still a big car. Fun fact, this is actually larger than the current Mercedes-Benz E-Class. And that copious real estate continues inside. It does feel really big in here. Like the distance between the front seats is substantial, but I suppose it makes it feel like you're sitting in a large lounge chair. Also, unlike a lot of modern cars, this doesn't kind of shrink wrap around you. You kind of feel like you're sitting a bit more on the car than in the car, because like the shoulder line here is quite low. Just on ergonomics as well, I don't know about you guys, I cannot get comfortable in these seats. I know plenty of people do get comfortable in them. Maybe it's just my oddly shaped body, but yeah, I can't get comfy. Now, as far as the materials and the quality of fit and finish in here go, look, these were never designed to go head to head against, more premium brands, and it will vary depending on the year model and the trim spec you're looking at. But overall, it's fine. It feels appropriate for its age and kind of when this car was around and what it's about. But it is feeling a bit on the cheap side these days. Okay, now wear and tear in this particular car, it's interesting. So first of all, Cameron that owns it has retrimmed all the seats in this, I think it's leather. So seat condition in this one's great. In other ex-highway patrol cars that we've seen, the seats have had a hell of a workout. Elsewhere in the interior, it's a bit hit and miss. So bad things first. Some of the trim up here is scratched to pieces from, police officers probably putting their feet up there. But then there's good things. Like, I thought this would be scratched to bits, this whole center console, but it's in really good shape. Door cards aren't too bad. Steering wheel's pretty good. I think that might have been retrimmed as well. Look, obviously the amount of wear and tear will vary from car to car, but considering this is about as abused as these things get, this being the wear and tear, I think it's a good thing. Now, as far as practicality goes, door bins are absolutely rubbish. They're not big enough for a large bottle. There's a spot just here to put, I suppose, like the tiers of criminals that you've apprehended just in there. This whole center console fascia, it might vary depending on the one you're looking at. This has been replaced for the infotainment system. We'll get to that in a second. So there is storage under the infotainment system, but the one you're looking at might not have that. There is a spot for your phone under there. There's two cup holders. You've got storage cubby hole here with like an auxiliary and USB input. There's a pretty good sized glove box. Nowhere for your sunglasses, nothing under the seats. What's this? Oop, that's the fuse box. That's not storage. Sorry. I think that's it for practicality up front. Okay, now in the back seat, I'm exactly 17 centimeters taller than legendary iconic Ford racing driver Dick Johnson. This is in my driving position. Wow. It is comfortable back here. This is so much more comfortable than the front seat. Like body positioning wise, I feel like I'm just like in a really comfy lounge chair, like better than an IKEA lounge chair. Heaps of knee room, loads of foot room, good glass house, good headroom. Yeah, obviously designed for families because it is so comfortable back here. It's just a shame that most of the people that sat in the back of this one were naughty. Now, as far as wear and tear in the back of this, considering the sort of unsavory characters that spent time back here, it's pretty good. Obviously, as I said, Cam's retrimmed the seats, so they're great. But you can tell people have tried to kick the shit out of the center console here because there's scratches and stuff all over the place. Door cards are in good condition, but it's good back here. Now, as far as practicality in the back seat, you've got your own air vents and controls. You've got a couple of map pockets. There's a spot for more criminals tiers just here. And there's also, there's an armrest, which is a little bit on the tight side, with two cup holders just there. Let's put that back up. Yeah, that's it for practicality in the back. Okay, now practicality in the boot, obviously, as this was designed to be a practical family car, loads of space back here. Actually, you know what, just on that, like families for decades were fine living with cars with this much space, but apparently families these days must have like a dual cab ute or an SUV for practicality in the boot. No, this will do. Now guys, we are talking about like a 10 to 15 year old car here, so let's not go getting too excited about tech and features, but even in the very early base models, you're still going to get climate control, cruise control, and like power everything. And then the XR models, they get sport seats, larger wheels, unlimited slip diff, and all of this. And then the early G6 models, they get Bluetooth, a screen, a reversing camera, and all of this. However, if you move up to like an FGX, even in a base model, you're going to get Ford's Sync 2 system, you're going to get parking sensors and a whole bunch of other stuff like this. And then you get like better sound systems, larger wheels again, and all of this on the later model G6s and XRs. But did you notice that there's no Apple CarPlay or Android Auto on any of that? That's because Ford's Sync 2 system doesn't support that. Obviously anything earlier also doesn't support that. The good news is, as Cameron that owns this car has done, you can fit CarPlay and Android Auto with aftermarket gear, and there are complete fascia units to fit. But again, guys, make sure you use quality components because the cheap ones off eBay and Alibaba, they generally suck. Now look, as far as safety goes, look, it is a powerful rear-wheel drive sedan built on a platform that is decades old, so structural rigidity isn't exactly fantastic. And as far as the tech goes, it's pretty old as well. So how safe it is going to depend on your levels of self-discipline. But to take you through exactly what safety features you can expect, we're going to cut to another voiceover, but this time we're going to have another quite famous performance-focused Ford do the voiceover. It's Harrison Ford.
So you're going to get at least 4 airbags, maybe even 6 on some models. Electronic stability control, traction control, anti-lock brakes, electronic brake force distribution, brake assist, and front seatbelt pretensioners. But you can forget about any active or autonomous safety equipment. This Ford is too old for that.
Okay, look, I try not to be somebody that kind of gets, I don't know, wrapped up in all the bullshit about a car's mystique and image, but I tell you what, there is just something about driving a car that is designed specifically for our conditions, that has a bucket load of power under your right foot, that is wrapped up in something so quintessentially Australian, that makes it so special. And it's just so sad we don't do anything like this anymore. Plus then, knowing that this was once a highway patrol car, so that means that this was a car that many of us just completely feared, and also knowing that this has been involved in who knows how many police chases and whatever crazy police antics, it just adds even more legitimacy to the car. Also, I have it on good authority that a lot of highway patrol police officers, this is still their preference over all of the other cars they get to drive. But look, aside from all the romance and reputation stuff, guys, it is still so impressive. Now, look, we live in a world where there are standard hot hatches that can do 11-second quarter miles. I was concerned that this might feel a little bit lazy, a little bit underdone, but even though it's completely stock, it doesn't. It is such a lovely amount of power. Second gear, feed it on. Yeah, impressive. Like, it's not a scary amount of power. It's not like, oh my God, what is happening? This is all too much. It's just this muscular, lovely, torquey feed of power. And when you're actually feeding the power on, that process is so enjoyable. But then, because it's not like loaded to the brim with like safety and driver tech, it feels just the right amount of old school. Like, it feels like you're a major part of the equation to keep this thing on the road. It's not just a bank of computers doing all the work for you. Plus, because the tech that is there to keep you on the black stuff is like a decade or over a decade old, you can't take liberties with it. Like, you can't just floor it and hope for the best. It will throw you into the shrubs. But then that requires respect and a bit of talent behind the wheel to keep you on the straight and narrow. And because it is, like, I hate using this term, but because it is quite analog, like around town or even out on the freeway, it's engaging and involving. It's really so enjoyable to drive all the time. The ride is on the firm side, but for me, it kind of feels like it gives the car this confidence on the road. And then, guys, like the steering, the handling, the braking, even though this has copped a heap of abuse, it still feels really good. But look, it's not perfect. There are some negatives. Firstly, as I mentioned before, this seating position, I just can't seem to get comfortable. I know that's just me. This is going to sound a bit wanky, but like the dynamics and nuance in cars, it clearly has moved forward a bit. This does feel a bit like a meat cleaver in a scalpel fight. There are a few like odd rattles and squeaks and weird noises. But in saying that, knowing what the history of this car is, the fact that there aren't too many rattles and squeaks, considering the abuse it's copped, is pretty impressive. And then, of course, there's the fact that when you do flex that right foot, this thing drinks like a fish. To give you an idea, hopefully this isn't right, but the average consumption I'm seeing is 21.8 litres per 100 Ks. Ow! But the biggest negative with this car is, the fact that we don't make anything like this anymore. That's just sad. Oh, also, while we're talking negatives, we probably should do this next bit, sorry. Okay, we've got to do this. What goes wrong with them? Let's start with the exterior, and first up, unfortunately, it is rust. First up, check around the hinges of the bonnet. Also the seams, it's under here and kind of around here, but the seams under the bonnet as well. Rust is popping up. Also in the boot, again, check the hinges, check the seams, and also anywhere where like cabling runs to like the lights or the boot mechanisms, they've got to be clean because they can gather water and they're starting to rust. Oh, also with the boot as well, take everything out of the boot and check in the wheel well, like in the spare wheel well. There's some signs of rust popping up there for some owners as well. Now, speaking of water being a complete prick, you do need to see where you're going, especially when it's raining. That's why you need to get yourself some WiperTech wiper blades. Honestly, guys, they are really some of the best wiper blades we have ever used. To get yourself a set for 15% off and free express shipping, simply hit the link down below. Okay, next up, the tires. They can wear prematurely because it is a pretty big and heavy car, and these are hilariously fun to drive. Also, and this is critical with these, look for any dodgy modifications or poorly repaired crash damage. Okay, this one it's not exclusive to the Falcon. This happens on heaps of cars, but if these things aren't cared for and aren't garaged, the paint can fade. Certain colors are worse for this than others, but remember, it's a big car. Getting it resprayed or completely wrapped, that's going to be expensive. But look, overall with the exterior, these were engineered and built to handle our tough Aussie conditions, and overall they're doing pretty well. Okay, now inside the interior door handles, they have a habit of just not working anymore. The exterior ones can, so I suppose you can put your window down and open or close it, or open it from the outside. Also, the door handle itself, apparently they're pretty fragile. But the good news with that, these are easy to get and they're really cheap and they're really easy to install. Next up, the electric mirror switches. Actually, a lot of the switches around here, like the door lock actuators and even the power window switches, they can go on the fritz pretty commonly. But again, good news, they're not expensive and they're easy to fix. Now, as I kind of alluded to before, the infotainment systems, they can be an absolute nightmare. The standard ones, we're talking Bluetooth either not connecting or dropping out, screens going black or completely blue, even using it not intuitive at all. Many people in the FG community just recommend ditching the standard system and doing what Cameron has done and fit an aftermarket system. Then there's the traditional Falcon roof lining sag. It kind of looks like an upside down parachute. This is so common on Falcons, I start to wonder if maybe like Ford engineered the roof lining just to sag because it's just, you know, traditional Falcon. Okay, now the HVAC or the air conditioning systems, they're starting to have a few problems with this age as well, like blower motors blowing out. But the good news is replacing the blower motor, unlike a lot of cars we've got to remove the entire dashboard to get to it, with the Falcon, it's kind of up underneath the glove box. If you want to see how to replace it, because it's something you can do at home, go and check out the YouTube channel FG Mods. He has a full tutorial on how to do that. Also on that channel, heaps of other great information about FG Falcons. Check it out. Actually, while we're on the subject of other videos to watch, once you finish watching this one, before you buy one of these, go and watch our Ultimate Used Car Buyer's Guide, because it could save you a fortune when you're buying not just one of these, but any used car. Okay, now before we get into mechanically what can go wrong with these things, I have mentioned this guy a few times now. Cameron, you legend, thank you for lending us your FG Falcon. You're a bloody legend, mate. Actually, if anyone out there has another kind of cool car that you think would make a good ReDriven video, let us know in the comments down there or hit us up on the socials. Secondly, everybody in the FG community that helped us put this video together with your research and knowledge and advice, you guys are legends. Thank you so much. Actually, speaking of communities, guys, ReDriven is growing so much faster than we could have ever anticipated, and it's because of you in the ReDriven community supporting us. The more of you that hit that subscribe button to support us, the bigger and better videos that we can make for you. Thanks so much, guys. Okay, now mechanically, what can go wrong with these? Well, I'm not qualified to tell you. Guys, I'm not a mechanic, but Jim is.
The good old Barra. Look, as for the V8 and the 4-cylinder turbo, the EcoBoost, we'll cover them in another video. But for now, just the Barra. There's a good reason these are so popular with engine swaps and performance applications. Yeah, they do make great horsepower, but they're also bloody reliable. When they're modified, yes, they can brake in spectacular fashion, but in standard unmodified form, now provided that the car that they're in doesn't rust away from around the outside of it, you can get 400,000 or 500,000 Ks out of these things, if they've been serviced occasionally. The Barra is good, but it's not perfect. They do have a few issues. Like any engine, you will see the occasional water pump, some coil pack complications, but pretty easy fixed. They do have some issues with the drive belt or the serpentine belt. They have some issues with their idler pulleys and the tensioners, and occasionally you see some timing cover oil leaks too. But look, all that stuff is pretty easily and inexpensive to fix. We actually had one in the workshop recently with a really interesting belt alignment issue. The belt was misaligned because it had crank walk. Now, crank walk is where the crankshaft thrust washers wear so much it allows longitudinal movement in the crankshaft. And when the clutch was pushed on this thing, it was moving the crank forward and causing the belt to misalign. This thing had done 500,000 Ks and had never been apart. In this case, we just got a second-hand replacement engine, fixed it, quick and easy, back on the road. Occasionally we do also see power steering pump complications. Sometimes they leak, and sometimes the high pressure line can be a problem too. And if it's had a sketchy service history, you should really check the oil supply line to the turbo. They can get a bit clogged up, and that can make your turbo very unhappy. Now, the driveline in these, look, the transmission, the auto is a ZF, and that's the same transmission that's used in a bunch of other rear-wheel drive applications. It's pretty reliable, especially if serviced occasionally, and if something should go wrong, look, parts are never going to be an issue, and there are plenty of specialists around that can repair that for you. The 6-speed manual is by Tremec, again used in a bunch of different rear-wheel drive applications by a whole lot of manufacturers. It's also used in the Falcon's arch nemesis, the HSV Commodore. Occasionally they do see some synchro issues, but overall pretty reliable. Further down the driveline, the tail shaft center bearing, that's a really common problem on these. And now you'll know that's failed when you accelerate and you just hear a repetitive clunk under the floor. Now, sometimes after that's done, there can be some misalignment and some imbalance problems, so just make sure that everything's phased properly when that goes back together. Further down the drive line, look, the diff bushes in these are a pretty common problem. Bit of a pain in the ass to fix, but there are plenty of aftermarket bushes that last heaps longer than the original Ford ones. Ford did improve the front wheel bearing issue and the ball joint complication of the earlier models, but they do still fail, so just keep an ear on that too. Now, I know that seems like actually a fairly long list of issues, but overall they are considered to be very reliable. The problems start when they're treated poorly and badly modified. So if you're buying one or if you're doing mods on one, just make sure those mods are done right and just keep the car good. They're worth it. They're a pretty good thing.
Okay, so should you buy one? Look, first of all, the V8 fans are going to hate what I'm about to say, but the Barra Turbo is without question the best locally developed engine that we have ever made. Plus the rest of the car easily matches it, and they were built to last, and pricing ranges from bargain to investment. So what's not to love? But it's not all good news. Look, yes, modified Barra engines are capable of incredible numbers, but big power will eventually result in big repair bills. So we'd be avoiding any heavily modified examples. Plus, with the XR6 Turbo being quite an overt performance car, there's a pretty high chance that many on the used market have lived extremely hard lives. Look, that's not the car's fault, and the right example can be brilliant, but we'd be steering you towards a G6E Turbo over the XR6 Turbo. Being the more luxury-focused Falcon, hopefully it's been treated accordingly. Look, honestly, no matter which Falcon of this generation you're looking at, just make sure the one you're looking at has a perfect service history. Make sure you get a pre-purchase inspection done, and if it ticks all the boxes, yes, absolutely buy one. It is an absolute classic and totally deserving of its iconic status. But would you buy one, or would you get a Commodore? Would you get something Japanese or European? Let us know what you'd buy, this or something else. Let us know in the comments. See you next time. Oh my God, my brain. Now guys, we are talking about kind of a 10 to 15 year old car here, so let's not getting too oh my God, I can't actually speak.
Again, the diff bushes, they're an ever going, ongoing, that was shit.
Now, before we get into mechanically what can go wrong with these things, look, I've mentioned a few. Oh my God, Morris, slow down, dickhead. Okay, now in the back seat, I'm exactly 17. Okay, look, I try to. The seats have had a hell of a workout. You going there? Okay, here we go.